Welcome back to Steven Shinder reviews in video form with another installment of Planet of the Ape Rule. There's been a lot of space between these vids I've been putting out. Things have been super busy this past week with music related stuff I'm involved in and stuff I've needed to update regarding the novel writing side of things in my life. But so Planet of the April might go into May, but I anticipated that this would happen anyway, so it's no big deal. First off, thoughts that don't really spoil this film I'm about to talk about, which is Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, the fourth film in the Planet of the Apes film series from the late 60s, early 70s. Last time, I talked about Escape from a Planet of the Apes, which is generally considered the best of the Planet of the Apes sequels in the classic series. As great as it is, my personal favorite of those sequels is this one that came right after, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. On my most recent viewing of it, I did kind of question whether I'd still put it above Escape, but I think I'm sticking with my gut on this one. I think my love for Conquest is similar to what I love about 2011's Rise of the Planet of the Apes, which I kind of see as a spiritual successor to this particular installment. Watching these films as a teenager, Conquest really hit me with the rebellion and uprising vibe of it all. We get a fascinating tale of how apes came to power, and there are some unsettling yet necessary moments, hence why this was rated PG while the previous films were rated G at the time. Make no mistake, this may not simply be a prequel, it's more complicated than that. The first three films are prerequisites for this. 1971's Escape from the Planet of the Apes only took place 2 years further out from its release in the year 1973. But in 1972's Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, we have an even bigger time jump, this time in the futuristic year of 1991. So here's what happened between films. The general backstory informing this dystopia prior to really getting into this story. And I recall Escape even touched on this backstory that Cornelius had known about thanks to the Sacred Scrolls. So in 1983, some astronauts returned from space and brought with them a virus that wiped out cats and dogs. So this would have been 10 years after Escape. What happened afterward was within a span of only 8 years, apes then became pets, and eventually this evolved into apes getting put into slave labor. Isn't that bananas? Has there been an officially released Planet of the Apes expanded universe story covering that plague? I'm not sure there is. It feels like there's a lot of leaps made there that make the status quo we see in Conquest, but I kind of love how bananas that is. Interestingly, the previous film described these events as having happened over the course of around 500 years. The Sacred Scrolls said there were less than 2 centuries of apes going from doing pet tricks to performing real services, and then 3 more centuries before supposedly an ape named Aldo said no and turned against the human oppressors. There is the possibility that the text of the Sacred Scrolls are not 100% truthful, there might have been some tampering, but I like to think Zera and Cornelius changed the timeline when they went to the past. The first episode of the later 1974 Planet of the Apes TV series, which was live action and set in the 31st century, showed a dog still around and owned by a chimp, as well as a book showing human civilization still in control with the year 2503 on it. I like to think that a TV series, the 1968 film, and Beneath take place in what I'll call here Timeline A, while Escape, Conquest, Battle, and maybe even the animated series take place in timeline B, although there might be a couple complicated things there. I'll touch on that a little bit more in the next video. In Conquest, the architecture as it's presented, complete with these oppressive looking jumpsuits the apes have been given, paint a dystopian feel. Funny enough, UC Irvine, the school I went to, is in this. You can see the social science tower at a time when the area didn't really have trees next to it that you can see. The emptiness works in its favor here. It wasn't until after I was set to go to UCI that I found out the sequel I'd loved had featured a bit of it. So I guess that adds another layer to my personal enjoyment of this film. In this city setting, we catch up with Armando passing out circus flyers, accompanied by Cornelius and Zira's now 18-year-old son, played by Cornelius's actor Roddy McDowell. Spoilers for the beginning of the film. Baby Milo is now named Caesar, which makes sense as Armando would want to conceal his identity. Armando has informed Caesar about this backstory and how apes became enslaved. We see apes doing all this work for humans, and they are told no when displeased. One of them, an ape apparently credited as Aldo, gets beaten. I gotta wonder if this Aldo was on the verge of saying no, and maybe had his glory taken away as Caesar here yells out, "You lousy human bastards!" The humans hear Caesar, believing him to be Cornelius and Zira's child, and interrogate Armando as Caesar hides out among the ape slaves. He is won by Governor Breck in an auction. Earlier, I said it was smart of Armando to change Baby Milo's name. Here, I find it silly that Caesar is told by Breck to open this book filled with names, flip through it, and point at a name, and that would be his new name. And with so very few flips, Caesar just so happens to find the name Caesar in this book and use that. I kind of wish Armando had given him a different name, or maybe he gets a different name here and later says, "My name is Caesar," owning that identity again. We've also been introduced to Breck's assistant, McDonald, who has more empathy for Caesar. Spoilers for the middle of the film. Armando is unconvincing during the interrogation, having claimed he said lousy inhuman bastards, and that it wasn't his chimp at all. He's trying to say it wasn't Caesar. Before he can go, he is asked to go through this machine that makes people tell the truth. Wanting to protect Caesar, Armando jumps through the window glass of this tall building and falls to his death. What the heck? These movies, they go so hard. What? Caesar hears word of this, he hears of Armando's death as he works among the apes. Looking at the circus poster, and while nobody's around, he lets out a visceral cry. It's so heartbreaking, and it really says a lot that Armando was willing to go through such lengths to protect basically his surrogate son, So as Caesar continues working, he does all this scheming behind the scenes, uniting the apes into a strong unit. Breck eventually figures out that Caesar is the ape that they're hunting, the ape that speaks, as he supposedly arrived in a cage from Borneo, where there are orangutans but no chimps. They say that there are no chimps in Borneo. Caesar speaks to McDonald, and while McDonald feels for him, he is not so sure about Caesar's idea of a revolution against humans. Caesar is captured and tortured via this device that gives him immense pain. He tries not to speak, but can't take it, saying the words, "Have pity." I can't help but be reminded of when Taylor asked Zaius to help him at the end of Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and then launched the bomb essentially after the refusal to help. The pain continues, but McDonald unplugs the machine, and Caesar pretends to drop dead. With Breck gone, Caesar ends his torturer and continues his plans. Spoilers for the end of the film. Caesar leads the apes in a revolution, setting the city on fire. I love the stark contrast between the dark buildings and the fire here. It feels very primal, and I think Tom Scott's music does the job here. The apes even fight riot police as they're told no and the command home in an effort to make apes return home and stop doing all this stuff. The apes get the upper hand with Governor Breck under Caesar's thumb, essentially. MacDonald, a descendant of slaves, as he puts it, pleads for Caesar to reconsider, saying that violence prolongs hate and hate prolongs violence. And then Roddy McDowall delivers possibly his most chilling delivery in this series. I'm not even sure that I can do justice to this, but where there is fire, there is smoke, and in that smoke from this day forward, my people will crouch and conspire and plot and plan for the inevitable day of man's downfall, the day when he finally and self destructively turns his weapons against his own kind, the day of the writing in the sky when your cities lie buried under radioactive rubble, when the sea is a dead sea and the land is a wasteland out of which I will lead my people from their captivity. And we will build our own cities in which there will be no place for humans except to serve our ends. And we shall found our own armies, our own religion, our own dynasty. And that day is upon you now. And it almost ended like right after this. The original ending of this was that apes using the butts of their rifles and guns to, all the weapons that they have, like basically using them to kill the humans here. But this was deemed too dark. So they dubbed some lines over reused shots and reversed some of the motion in the ending from the looks of it, which can look pretty obvious. Before striking the killing blows, all the apes hear Caesar's mate, Lisa, say no. By the way, she's played by Natalie Trundy, who played different human characters in the previous two films and is in as many of these movies as Roddy. So after hearing Lisa, Caesar seems to suddenly have more compassion. I'm not really sure if hearing her gave him enough pause to see reason and that maybe things have escalated too much, or if he just really didn't want to blow his chances with her. It's kind of funny to think about. He shares some words that soften the blow so that the apes don't kill these humans. Even calling back to Armando's line in Escape about the will of God and all that. He says, "But now we will put away our hatred. Now we will put down our weapons. We have passed through the night of the fires, and who were our masters are now our servants. And we who are not human can afford to be humane. Destiny is the will of God. And if it is man's destiny to be dominated, it is God's will that he be dominated with compassion and understanding. So cast out your vengeance. Tonight we have seen the birth of the planet of the apes." And oh my gosh, the first time I ever saw this, when he said birth of the planet of the apes, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, it was just so good. Like, Roddy's delivery, like, even though that last part was thrown in post production, I still think it really, really works. It very well could have worked with, Caesar having gone really dark, and maybe the next film is about him reaching this conclusion that they threw in at the end about, maybe we have to be more humane. I could see that arc working, but I still think it works putting it in here, showing the seeds of how, Caesar can still he still has compassion, and there might still be a little bit of hope. Because, what if this movie hadn't done so well and that was just the bleak ending and that was like all of it, but I don't know, maybe it would have um I don't know, maybe it could have at least been very memorable. I don't know. But anyway, the apes cheer with humans seeming uncertain, and a zoom in on Caesar's face that kind of looks like he's questioning how everything will end up. Talking about it, I really think this is my favorite of the sequels. Figuring out decimals for this score would be complicated, and I don't really have a lot of free time for this. So this is another one that's getting a 9 out of 10 from me. Again, I don't really believe in objective ratings. I rate based on how much I enjoy things, and this one really hits me deep within. So yeah, that's my review of Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. I also really like how the title sounds. It just has a nice cadence to it. But yeah, so the next video will, of course, be the final film of the classic series, Battle for the Planet of the Apes, and then I'll be moving on to other Apes releases from there. So hopefully it won't be too long of a wait. Things will kind of slow down a bit on my end in terms of, the workload. So hopefully you won't have to wait too long for the next one, and the gaps won't be too long. So, yeah, until then, I'll see you all next time. Thanks for tuning in.